without which we cannot imagine the night sky, which celestial body directly influences many processes occurring on our planet, which Titan states are fighting for primacy in the study of the surface and depths of this object. Of course, you guessed that. We will talk about the moon, the presence of this satellite, as well as its possible absence in our sky globally affects or can affect the life of humanity. That is why a detailed study of the largest object closest to us is of primary priority for such mastodons as the USA and China. Here there is a good old struggle for primacy and resources, two troubles that haunt humanity throughout its entire existence on Earth. But who will win in this space race, let's say, right away? For now, China is in the lead and NASA with its Artemis drearily drags along in their subscribe so the moon. How exactly it was formed and when it became our neighbor, there are three main hypotheses of the appearance satellite in our sky. The first says that the moon and Earth were formed from a common protoplanetary cloud. The second claims that the Earth, as a larger object with the help of gravity, once captured the moon and forced it to rotate around. But the most popular hypothesis, confirmed by the results of tests and other research, is a giant collision or mega impact. This refers to an ancient collision of the Earth with some object similar to it in size, approximately the size of Mars. As a result of this catastrophic event, the moon was formed from the debris. What news from the scientific world appeared relatively recently and partially confirmed the latest theory. They are related to the activities of the Chinese AMS Chang'e. The task set before them consists of studying the surface and depths of the moon. Since the project is part of the global lunar program of the PRC Chang'e 3, delivered to the Moon Lunar Rover, U2 Chang'e 4, contributed to landing on the surface of the satellite lunar rover, U22 Chang'e 5 in 2020, delivered to Earth samples of lunar soil for the first time since 1976. But Chang'e 6 in the summer of 2024 did something that had never been before. It mined soil from the far side of the moon. In general, within the framework of this mission, there were many exclusive events. For example, U22, for the first time in the history of astronautics, took a picture of the far side of our satellite from a close distance. Since it is impossible to directly transmit information to Earth from this hemisphere, because the moon is in tidal lock and is always turned Taoist with its other side, China took care of solving this problem in advance. Back in 2018, the artificial relay satellite Tuyo was launched to the Lagrange point between the Earth and the moon. It is he who successfully acts as an intermediary and transmits valuable information to the Chinese AMS Mission Control Center. By the way, lunar rover UTU-2, although in sleep mode, had to experience the harsh temperatures of the lunar night when the instruments showed about 190 degrees. The device is still on the far side of the moon and moves along it extremely slowly, literally by touch, exploring the surface of our satellite. Turtle speed is explained by the characteristics of the soil, which differ from the visible side of the satellite. At the same time, the Lunokhod became a record holder for the duration of operation, since it worked on the moon for 340 Earth days. What did the device discover on the far side of the moon? Fact is that China is in no hurry to share with the world important news, and especially sensations, partially because it does not want to help the main competitors in the race of the mission organized by NASA under the name Artemis. However, some information still leaks into the scientific journals Science and Nature and, accordingly, on media portals. At the moment, it is known that on the far side of the moon, a Chinese apparatus found unusual anorthosite glass beads having most likely an impact origin. They were immediately dubbed meteorite glass. Apparently they appeared here as a result of asteroid attacks when the surface literally melted from the high temperature caused by the impacts. Also, U22 discovered a live-in Antarctoporok, probably falling on the surface of the moon's mantle again as a result of the impact. Radiation indicators were measured on the surface of the satellite, by the way, also for the first time. It turned out that these parameters were almost twice higher than on the ISS and 200 times higher than on the surface of the Earth. Also, a unique biological experiment was carried out on board. The landing module, a special container, contained seeds of potatoes, rapeseed, and other plants, as well as Drosophila fly eggs. After landing, the seeds were automatically watered with water. Later, some of them sprouted, which became a biological sensation since this is the first case of seed germination on the surface of another celestial body. What discovery of the lunar rover Weitu-2 excited the public most of all? The strange object that the device noticed in December 2021, about 80 men-hours from itself. It was an object of a cubic shape of an unknown purpose, but it seemed so only from afar. When approaching, it turned out that it was a stone of an original configuration. Most likely, it broke off from something larger and was thrown out of the bowels of the crater. At the moment, Weitu remains in the von Karman crater, continuing observation and periodically falling into hibernation when the next lunar night comes. That's how China found itself ahead of the rest of the planet and was the first to explore the far side of the moon, the most mysterious and unexplored. What can be said regarding Chang'e 5 where and when the device named after the Chinese goddess of the moon landed on December 1st, 2020, the return AMS successfully descended on the basalt plateau, which is about 2 billion years old, located in the Ocean of Storms. This is the largest lunar sea on the visible hemisphere of the moon. The size of the Ocean of Storms is about 2,500 kilometers, and its area is about 4 million kilometers. Chang'e 5 not only landed on the moon, but took more than a kilogram of lunar soil samples from the specified area and delivered them to Earth. The capsule fell in the wild steppe of China, a region called Inner Mongolia. What surprised scientists when the results of the study of lunar soil samples were partially made public, the age of the rocks found on the basalt plateau was about 2.5 billion years. This is not surprising because the location is relatively young, but one fragment was much older. Its age is dated to about 0.2 billion years. Its appearance here remains a mystery, as is the fact that among the glass particles in the form of small spheres, very young samples were found, the age of which does not exceed 123 million years. This completely refutes the theory that volcanism on the moon ceased about 2.5 to 2.9 billion years ago. But why have we not seen volcanic eruptions on visual observation of our satellite? After all, such events of even a small scale can be noticed through a telescope. The answer to this question is still unknown. In any case, this calls into question the current ideas about the geology of the satellite and requires further research. What other sensations were expected by the scientific community? In connection with the activities of the Chang'e 5 mission, a new phosphate mineral was found, the sixth element discovered by people on the surface of the moon. Also, water was extracted from samples of lunar soil by Chinese scientists. This happened during heating of the material. Here the practical application of knowledge is involved, for example, in the colonization of the moon, or the creation of a transshipment. Base on it, if from 1 g of lunar soil you can get 76 milliliters of water, then from 1 ton 76 liters of water will come out, which will be enough for 50 astronauts for the whole day. This changes radically the idea of the dead surface of the satellite and makes plans for its development more real. Well, and finally, Chang'e 6. What this device was able to surprise humanity with, first of all, was that for the first time in history, it delivered soil to Earth in the amount of 2 kilos from the far side of the moon, namely, from the Apollo Popot crater. The device unfurled the national flag of the PRC on the surface in this location. There were no earthly attributes before, guided by the experience of the previous automatic station Chang'e 6 on June 25, 2024, delivered soil samples to Earth and to the same region, the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region. Preliminary results of the study of rocks from the far side of the moon are very sparsely covered in the scientific press. In particularly, it is indicated that the soil in this location is more porous and loose, and also, a lot of plagiaulase was found in the sample. The mineral is considered magmatic and quite common in space. For example, it's found on the asteroid Antakawa. Another important point in the delivered soil. There are extremely few rare earth elements of potassium and phosphorus, so-called creep. This fact significantly distinguishes this sample from those that were delivered by the Chan Probe 5 and the Apollo mission. This is Another proof of how different the visible and hidden hemispheres of the moon are in their physical and geological characteristics. From the non-obvious, it is worth noting that such a difference, as well as the discovery of rocks similar to those on Earth, can be indirect evidence of the veracity of the mega-impact theory. But how are things going with the main competitors of the American-Chinese space race? Unfortunately, the Artemis program has not had as many successes as its Chinese colleagues. This research program was established in 2017 by the infamous politician Donald Trump. So far, only part of the Artemis mission has been completed successfully. 1. The Orion unmanned spacecraft in 2022, launched by Smith Kennedy. 25 days stayed in space and 3 days moved in the opposite direction, relative to the rotation of the moon, which is called retrograde orbit. But Artemis II and subsequent stages of this missionary, under great question, they assumed a manned flight of the same Orion ship and then the landing of astronauts on the surface of the moon, and the launch near the lunar station gateway. However, if this plan is ever destined to come true, the Chinese are at this stage far ahead of their competitors. And the problem is not only in the banal competition of countries. The fact is that if the AMS of the People's Republic of China manages to discover valuable resources on the moon, then it is quite possible that representatives of this country will monopolize the area of our satellite being explored, not allowing anyone there. Particularly concerning are the plans of the PRC Toriach, the south pole of the moon, where according to scientist forecasts, it may be located, a large accumulation of water ice. Read between the lines of a valuable resource, especially in the context of future colonization. America, however, has only far-reaching plans so far, by 2030, landing on the south pole of the moon by 2031. Landing on the moon with the K-Crew 2032, landing on the satellite with the delivery of a lunar cruiser, and so on, including the Artemis 10 mission, assuming a long stay of astronauts on the surface of the moon until 2035 year. Do you think it is possible to implement these ambitious plans, and who will be the first to achieve these goals, at least partially considering the speed with which Chinese technologies are flying forward, as well as the enthusiasm, even fanaticism of scientists? The answer to the question is obvious to the Celestial Empire. It is certainly impossible to say that NASA is inactive anti-radiation vests, launch vehicles, CubeSats, ultra-small artificial Earth satellites, innovative types of lunar spacesuits are being developed. If we summarize the intermediate results of the space race, then the USA and China now have a common goal: who will be the first to reach the south pole of the moon. What is remarkable about it? Firstly, the presence of water ice. Secondly, presumably, there are craters of eternal darkness, peculiar traps in which the substance is in the early stages of the formation of the solar system. Thirdly, an important point for future missions are hypothetical peaks of eternal light points on the surface of the moon that allow continuously recharging equipment with solar energy, for example, during a lunar night, since they never go into the shadows. Will the development of the moon and primacy in this matter, given the large-scale players who entered the battle, affect the balance of power and geopolitics of the globe? Share your opinions in the comments. Well, Earthlings, this is not the end of the video. There are still very interesting and simply enchanting releases ahead of us. But so that I can continue to please you with all the parcels of the universe, I need feedback. You can express it quite simply. You just need to put an electronic like under this video. After all, we simply have no other likes, and continue the phrase, I know. This way you will make it clear that we're moving in the right direction.